Lumberman paid a ransom in dust and silver. The woman on the platform changed everything. Dust rose in slow curtains. Noon burned flat and honest. A whistle cut the yard. Cade Merrick stepped out of the heat and stopped the sale. A single warning shot into the dust sent grit jumping at the foreman's boots. The crowd flinched. The Colt stayed low and safe in his hand. Muzzle down, both thumbs clear. The sound rolled under the eaves and died on a plank platform. A young woman stood with her hands bound in coarse rope, grey calico dress dusted pale, hair braided to one shoulder, her eyes steady like river stones. "Ada Lark," someone whispered behind the troughs. "Owes Clegg for board and doctor and a broken window." A lie breathed through teeth. Cade holstered the gun and held up a small cloth pouch, the kind you keep near your ribs. Silver clicked inside like hard rain. He put it in the foreman's palm, hard and simple, then added a folded chit for 3 cords of split pine delivered before first frost. Clegg weighed the pouch. "Suspicion like flies around meat," the men in the yard muttered. One laughed and swallowed it when Cade looked. There was no speech, just knife to rope, a clean slice. The rope fell like shed skin. Ada did not move until Cade said, "Come down, miss. Nobody touches you while I stand." His tone the quiet you hear in old timber just before it falls. She stepped off the box as a gust sent straw and dust against her shins. The platform creaked. A boy cheered, then hid behind his mother's skirt. The visible thing happened in daylight, and it ended the way a fuse ends, not with fireworks, with a hiss and a stare. Clegg spat near Cade's heel and said, "The debt's square. The rest is your trouble, Lumberman." The crowd found reasons to look anywhere but the two of them. The way people do when mercy ruins their afternoon. Cade's black gelding waited. Saddle worn but clean. An axe handle showed under the bedroll. Wood sap dried in a thin sheen along the grain. The man lived among trees and it clung to what he owned. He handed Ada a canteen, no talk, just water. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. They walked, not fast, a straight line toward Rook Creek Road where the mill wagons made ruts deep enough to swallow a boot. Above them the high rim of Mender's Gap took the sky and sliced it clean. Wind rolled down from the stone, dry and honest. Ada kept pace without asking where, an old habit in every step. Move first, questions later behind. Trouble decided it did not like being ignored. 3 riders peeled off the porch shade, hats low. One wore a red kerchief like a warning flag. The foreman's cousins, maybe, the kind who hear coin and taste it. Cade saw them in the reflection on his horse's eye. A dark smear where calm ought to be, he said. "Keep to my right, miss," and eased the holster lower so the butt wouldn't catch on the pommel if he needed it. Still muzzle down, still safe. The first set piece arrived the way storms do on clear days. Sudden and certain. A freight wagon shot from the alley at a bad angle. A spooked team dragging it. A barrel rolled free and bounded toward the well. Someone yelled and pointed. The wagon skidded toward them like a sliding tree. Cade moved, took Ada by the forearm, and swept her to the shaded side of the trough. He caught the wagon's side rail with both hands and shoved, boots digging. The team veered, wood screamed, iron kissed stone. The wagon scraped by and rattled into open ground where men ran and threw lines. It missed them by the width of a hat brim. Dust flew into Cade's teeth. Ada pressed a palm to the wall and blew out a breath. She did not know she held. The 3 riders saw the moment and used it. Hooves hammered, kerchief man grinned. Cade stepped into the lane, slow as prayer, hand open, his voice even. "Yard's closed, boys." The way he said boys made one of them rein up without meaning to. Kerchief reached for his belt. Cade's gun came up, but not at them. He fired once to the left into a dead patch of dirt, a warning that sounded like a promise. The gelding took one step and settled. The riders thought about jail and about how Clegg never paid anybody's fine. They turned on Dust and went to tell a story where they were braver. Cade and Ada left the yard then. No one tried to stop them. The silence they carried made stopping feel dangerous. They cut east along Rook Creek Road. Cottonwood leaves shimmered like fish scales in the sun. Cicadas sang their endless song. The world did not change, and yet it had no talk for a mile. Just the sound of leather and dust and the soft clink of iron on the saddle ring. Then Cade said, "Name's Cade Merrick. Rook Creek Camp runs under my mark," she said. Ada Lark, voice low but firm. He nodded, as if that settled something he had been arguing with himself about. The gelding flicked an ear back to listen and then forward again. Rook Creek glinted between cottonwoods, pale green with a quick current. The bridge ahead was a narrow thing lashed with hemp and stubbornness. A mill bridge, slats good enough for a man and a mule if you walked straight. The long slide from the high meadow had been greased with spring rain, and it still creaked where the bolts worked loose each summer. Cade checked the knots by habit, 3 raps and a bite. Sound. "We cross here," he said. "Safer than the ford this week. Water's high." He went first, leading the gelding. Boards thumped a steady count. Ada followed, hand on the rope rail. Breath even. She had walked worse bridges with worse people at her back, but saying it and living it were cousins, not twins. Mid-span a logjam shifted upstream. Something heavy thumped the pilings. The bridge answered with a long, tired groan. Cade did not hurry. He widened his stance and let the sway pass through his hips the way a logger rides a float. He looked back once. "You're fine, keep eyes here." He tapped the plank with his knuckle. Her gaze anchored where he said, and the world steadied. On the far bank, he cut the gelding loose to drink, and they took shade under a cane cholla. Standing like a green candelabra, Cade unwrapped a heel of bread and a wedge of cheese from oiled paper, handed half to Ada. She ate without reaching for more, a not-hungry woman who had learned to ration want. He said the pouch made Clegg quiet for a week. After that we'll be loud in other ways if we must. Her eyes narrowed a little. Not Distrust Assessment Camp lay 2 miles upslope in a bowl of pine and wind. You could smell pitch from a quarter-mile. Axes talked to trunks, saws pulled and sang. Men moved logs with peaveys and curses and the slow strength that winters you. Cade's mark hung over the cookhouse door, burned into a pine plank. A simple circle with 2 cuts, a mill brand. Not much to look at until you knew it meant wages paid on time and boots mended when they split. He did not take her to the bunkhouse porch with the deck of greasy cards and the spittoon. He took her past the tool shed to a small board house set against a rock outcrop, door painted the faded blue of an old sky. The place had 1 clean window and a stovepipe like a pointing finger. He opened the door and stood aside. Inside, a cot with a wool blanket, a tin basin, a shelf with 2 books, a kettle, a jar of goose fat, a dress hook fashioned from a bent nail. Quiet order, not luxury. "You can stay here," he said. "Work if you want, rest if you need. Nobody bothers you under my roof." The words were simple, the promise older than law. She looked at the room and then at him, at the axe on his belt, the hands that had stopped a wagon, the throat that did not reach for excuses. She set the canteen on the shelf. The task of a person who expects to leave changed whether she wanted to or not. Noise came from the yard, a different kind. Not work noise, hoots and oaths and the unsteady clatter of a barrel rolling where it shouldn't. Cade's jaw set. He moved to the door without hurry. "Haste wastes," he said over his shoulder. "I'll see it. Stay inside." She did not argue. She stepped to the window instead, where the wavy glass made the world look like heat. Moving 3 of Clegg's men had followed after all, not the riders from the yard, different ones, 1 big, 1 thin, 1 with a limp and a grin that did not reach his eyes. They had a paper they shoved toward Cade. Words ran across it like ants, claim of property and debt, stamped with a seal that could be cut with a potato and a coat button. The big one said, "Law favors paper." The thin one said, "Town favors Clegg." The limper tasted the air like a coyote. Cade took the paper, read it, folded it, put it back in the man's vest pocket. "Your coat's loose at the shoulder seam," he said. "Get that stitched before the rain." And then he stepped aside so the yard could see the axe at his hip, not raised, not even touched, just there. Everyone remembered the warning shot and the way the wagon had slid. The big man looked at the axe and saw winter. The thin man looked at the bunkhouse and counted heads. The limper watched the bridge and measured courage against rope and water. Their math did not add up. They left with their paper and a story that would change with every retelling. The camp went back to work, relief loud in the clack of tools. Cade turned back toward the blue door, found Ada already outside with a broom, sweeping sawdust from the step. The bristles made a dry, singing sound. She did not look up when she said, "I don't want your name or your charity. I want to square what you paid and leave." Cade nodded. "Good," he said. "Square is easier to carry than gratitude." She stopped sweeping and actually looked at him then. The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile, the start of one. Afternoon lengthened. Clouds stacked over grey butte like folded blankets. A rim wind came up that smelled of rain, not yet decided. Cade walked the yard resetting wedges, checking the hoist rope where it ran over iron. He changed a worn pin and set it back with a quick hammer kiss. While he worked, he kept a peace of mind fixed on the road, expecting Clegg to try again. Men like that do not quit. They delegate quitting. Ada watched the small things and learned the camp by its movements, who limped, who laughed too loud, who watched without seeming to. She had lived where watching kept you whole near supper. A shout cut the noise, not fear warning rope, someone yelled, rope. The hoist line at the skidway had snagged on a split cleat. The load jerked. A log rolled off the stack and started down the slope. Slow at first, then sure. A brown cylinder that weighed as much as 6 men. It took the line of least pity and aimed for the path between the cookhouse and the blue door where Ada stood with that borrowed broom. Cade moved before the word formed. He sprinted, grabbed her by the waist and spun, boot heels digging trench. He put her behind the rock outcrop and threw his own weight against the broom handle, jammed into the ground as a lever. The log hit the rock, bounced, slashed the broom clean in two, knocked sparks from stone, and went skidding past into scrub where it finally slept. Silence after loud things has a flavor, metal and salt and breath. Cade's heart hammered the way a pile driver does when frost fights back. Ada's breath fluttered, then steadied. She pressed her palm to his chest as if to tell it to quiet, and it did. Some. The men on the skidway yelled apologies and curses and promises to fix the cleat. Cade waved them off. Accidents and patience are cousins. Fix it and move on the storm that had been thinking about itself. Chose evening to arrive. Not dark, not dangerous. A sheet of rain that cleaned dust off leaves and cooled tempers. The cookhouse steamed and smelled of coffee and beans and a hint of molasses. Ada ate at the blue door, Cade on the lower step, the space between them occupied by a tin plate that held biscuits taller than their trouble. She tore one in half and handed it over without ceremony. He took it the same way, simple exchange, worth more than paper. Night came slow and bright, no lamps needed for a while. Lightning walked far off along Red Mesa, like a traveler who knows where he is going. Cade set his revolver on a high shelf inside the blue room, muzzle down, cylinder open, a habit that said safety louder than any speech. He left his belt axe on the hook by the door where the handle could be seen and respected. Ada arranged the basin, wrung the cloth, folded her dress over the chair back, all of it precise, all of it the order of someone who has been denied choices and now insists on making small ones. Then the second trouble of the day came like a splinter under a nail, small and mean. A knotted rope dropped over the bridge rail, figures low in the pasture, the kind of crawl that belongs to night coyotes and men who think they are smarter than bridges. Clegg finally sent a brain with his muscle. 3 shadows eased toward the camp. Not by the road, by the creek bank, where scrub hid a man until he was at your door. The rain hid their noise. The creek took the rest. Cade was on his feet before the first shadow cleared the cottonwoods. He did not pull the gun. He took the axe from the hook and stepped onto the porch where the roof edge kept his eyes dry. He said, "Camp's closed." And the shadow in front said, "Not to us. Mr. Merrick, we got paper says the girl belongs to Clegg." The voice was smooth and trained to sound official. The man behind him shook a coil of rope and smiled at its sound. Ada stood in the doorway, not behind Cade. Beside him, she held a lantern at waist height so faces were seen, and lies had to be smaller. The light drew moths and also courage. She spoke her first hard sentence since the yard. "Your paper forgot to list me," she said. "I am not livestock. I am will and breath and debt to no one now." The smooth voice laughed like glass in a sack, and Cade saw it then, the print on the paper, the seal, the date from last week. Clegg had expected to use it on a different woman and changed a name with ink and nerve. Cade stepped down into the rain. He moved past the porch light and let the night own him. Then he spoke from the dark. "You came over my bridge with rope and counterfeit. You leave now with neither. If you step forward, I cut your line and you swim home." He put the axe edge against the bridge rope. Not cutting, warning, rain beaded and slid, the men hesitated. "All courage looks smaller when it is wet," the smooth voice said. "We can wait you out," and Cade said, "I can wait longer. I work trees." Lightning stitched the far ridge. For a heartbeat, everybody had their true face on. The smooth one's mouth tugged down because he saw no backup coming. The rope man's grin grew thin. The third man kept looking at the creek and the bridge and the slope, and did the math. It said retreat. They eased back into scrub, not fast, the kind of backdown you sell later as a tactical reposition. They left the rope. Cade pulled it in hand over hand, each loop heavy with what did not happen. When it was over, he coiled the rope and hung it by the door. Rain softened to a hush. Ada set the lantern on the floor and sat on the step. Knees drawn, the lightning moved farther along the mesa. She said, "Why me? Not why pay, why me?" And Cade answered, the way a man who has been wrong and quiet for years answers when he finally tells a true thing. "I saw you stand on a box like you were already taller than it. I saw you watch the crowd instead of begging it. I've been waiting on quiet that isn't empty. You looked like that." The creek went on talking about rocks and time. The camp settled. Somebody sang off key and then stopped mid-line the way men do when they remember they are not alone. Cade stood, said, "The bridge is a risk. If more come, there's another way out if we have to go," she said. "Go where?" he said. "Timber chute. Old slide on the far ridge, fast if you know it. It drops to the east road, the one no one uses. It will rattle your bones and make you swear you hate me. But it will carry us if the bridge cannot." Ada's eyes lit with something that looked like relief and fear braided together. The baby of two hard choices. They did not sleep much. Dawn found them already moving, bright and clean after rain. The world scrubbed to bone. Cade packed light, bread, jerky, a small pot. The revolver checked and safe. The axe hung at his hip. He saddled the gelding and led him. Not riding, not yet. Ada tied her braid tight and bound her skirt with a workman's strap at the knee so it wouldn't catch. She wore Cade's spare canvas coat, sleeves rolled, pockets empty but ready halfway up the far ridge. A shout cracked the morning, not from camp. From the pasture line, Clegg had finally found more men willing to trade hurt for coin. 5 riders this time, coming fast. Dust plumes straight as intentions. The bridge was behind and too open, the chute above still in shadow. The path between them a switchback, narrow as faith. Cade looked at the ridge and the riders and the rope they'd hung by the door. He chose up they ran, not wild, precise. Boots finding edges. The gelding grunted and climbed. Ada kept pace, breath a rough hymn. Below, the riders spread to flank. One fired into the air to rattle them. The shot echoed stupid against stone. Cade did not look back, he said. "When I say drop, you sit and slide. Heels forward, hands on the rail, no loose cloth, no loose fear. When we hit the bend, lean with me or the chute will chew you," she said. Understood and meant it. The chute mouth opened like a scar in the hill. Old timbers greased by seasons of sap and rain, rails polished by work long done. Cade vaulted the rail and offered a hand. Ada took it. They sat, boots ready. The gelding snorted and balked. Cade looped the lead around his wrist. "We ride first," he said. "Bishop will come when he must." The first rider crested and saw them and yelled like he had won something. Cade put both hands to the side rails, leaned, and the world moved. They dropped fast and loud, friction singing, wind tearing at hair and coat. The chute curved left. Cade leaned left. Ada followed, boards blurred, sparks spit where iron kissed old nails. Below, Rook Creek flashed silver, then vanished behind a cut. Their pursuers reached the lip and hesitated. 2 turned away. One, brave or foolish, slid in and tried to follow. His hat went at the first bend, at the second his nerve did. He flung himself onto a side bank and lay there, cursing his life choices. Cade and Ada rode the slide to the lower bend where it spat them into scrub. They rolled and rose in one breath. The gelding pounded down a side trail on his own. Smart horse choosing gravity over waiting. He reached them snorting, eyes bright. He had chosen them back. Cade laughed once, short and surprised. Ada laughed too. The kind of laugh you have when you find your pulse still doing its job. The east road lay open, bright and empty. The ridge hid the camp and Clegg both. Ahead the land flattened into sage and a sky large enough to hold new plans. Cade swung into the saddle and pulled Ada up behind him. Her hands found his belt, not clinging, anchored. He looked once more at the ridge, at the chute scar, at the lives on the other side of it. He spoke to the horse low, to the day even lower. "We ride quiet and we ride long. Rook Creek can mend without us for a spell." They turned east into sunlight. Dust puffed at every hooffall. A hawk traced lazy circles far above, as if writing their names where rain could not smudge them. Behind, the town would tell stories that did not match. Ahead, the road made its straight promise. And somewhere before noon, a river crossing waited. that could bless or drown a plane depending on how you stepped. They did not look back, and that is where the morning chose to end and the next trouble chose to begin. At the river's lip, where the bank dropped sudden and the current talked fast, Cade reined in and pointed at a shallow with stones like a braided spine. "We take that line, keep heels up. If the gelding slips, lean with him and trust his choice. Clegg's riders won't make the chute, but they will ride the long way, and they will not be kind when they catch breath." Ada nodded, jaw set, braid tight, the shawl knotted small, ready. The turning point stood up in front of them like a man, visible and waiting, and the water asked the single question it always asks: how much do you want the other side? Water talked fast over stones. The shallows drew a pale line like a spine. Cade pointed to it and breathed easy. "Heels up. We take the ridge of rock. Bishop knows his feet. Stay to my right and keep your eyes where my hand is, not on the rush." Ada nodded once, jaw set, braid tight. The canvas coat cinched neat, the rope coiled from last night across her chest like a sash. She had kept it without asking. They stepped in, cold biting through leather. Bishop felt for bottom and found it, ears forward. The current pushed at knees and promises. Cade led with the reins loose so the horse could choose. Ada copied the angle of his shoulders, and the river let her pass. Midstream a dark shape slid at them, a drift log with a stubborn root crown. It bumped the gelding's hock. Bishop jolted. Not panic, warning. Ada reached and looped the rope around a standing rock like she had done this all her life. The line caught, held, the log swung off and went on to trouble someone else downstream, hoof on stone, stone to sand. They rose dripping on the far bank into clean sun and a wide breath. Cade looked back once at the glitter and said, "Good work, Miss Lark," and meant it. She answered with a small sound that held more than thanks. Behind them, dust pulled itself into 5 threads on the far ridge. Riders had chosen the long road. No chute today, but noon would give those threads speed. East Road ran bright and open, sage tossing small green flags. A hawk drew a slow circle and wrote "Yes" above them. They kept an honest pace, not wasteful, not timid. The day stretched, the land grew human again. Fence posts, a pasture, a white box on a pole where someone once left letters and then voices. The far ferry yard at Willa Ford, a flatboat on a rope. A few wagons waiting in the bright like laundry on a line. Women with buckets. A child chasing its own shadow. A black dog asleep under the axle of a blue cart. Cade's shoulders eased and then squared. Public places helped, public places hurt. He kept the revolver holstered and muzzle down, safety strap settled. The axe at his hip said, "What needed saying?" They took shade by the notice board, read prices that never matched the work. The ferryman, an old man with arms like good rope, lifted a hand in greeting and said, "Next pull after this one." Then saw something in Cade's face and looked past him to the West Road. The 5 threads had become riders for anyone who wanted to see. The ferry crew did, the women did. Even the black dog opened one eye and decided not to move. Cade said soft for the ferryman alone. Last night they threw a counterfeit claim on a woman. This morning they throw speed. I will keep them loud and away from the boat. You keep your rope clean and your deck clear. The old man nodded, reached for the ferry cable with a grip that had pulled families through worse, and said, "I keep folks moving. That is my church." The first 2 riders came in hot, dust at knee-height, faces set to bully. The third had the paper, the fourth had a smile. The fifth kept checking angles. The leader called out Merrick. "You took Clegg's property." The words sounded wrong in daylight. People's eyes narrowed. Cade stepped forward until his boots kissed the line where the yard becomes the bank. He raised both hands, empty and clear, voice level. "You will not step onto this deck with rope or lies. If you have lawful cause, show it to the ferryman and the crowd, not to me." The crowd liked that. Law in sunlight tastes better. The paper fluttered. The seal was a smear. The date a fiction. Murmurs turned into small, sharp laughs. The smile on number 4 thinned. Number 5 shifted his reins and measured the river and the rope. Then the moment split. Not with a bullet. With a child's cry. The blue cart's little one had climbed the ramp and slipped. Feet went from under tiny boots. The ferry rocked. The kid pinwheeled off into the shallows where the slope dropped sudden. Water grabbed and tugged like an aunt with bad timing. Ada moved before sound finished. She ran light and sure, canvas coat flaring, shawl knot tight. She hit the edge, dropped to her stomach. Reached, current said no. She said yes with both arms and half her ribs. Fingers brushed cloth and missed. Second reach took hair, not enough. Cade was already there, flat and long, boots dug into the ramp boards. He pitched the rope coil across the skim. It kissed the child's chest and slid. Ada caught it and locked her wrist. Cade anchored her ankles with both hands and leaned back. Slow. Not fighting the river, asking it. The child spun once like a hooked trout and then lay across the ramp, bawling righteous and alive daylight, clapped its hands. Women pulled the child into blankets. Someone thanked everyone, and no one. The ferryman said, "Good, good," like a prayer, and the watching faces turned as one to the riders who had just been brave with paper. Courage is terrible at math in those moments. The leader puffed, tried for swagger, found none. He pushed his horse anyway, hoof on plank. Ferryman stepped in, set a pole across the ramp without menace. "Just wait. This deck is for crossing." "Not for fights," he said. "Law can speak from the bank." The crowd found their voices again and put them in a single place. The riders felt the balance change and hated it. Number 5 still checked angles. He saw one. The cable anchor, a big iron cleat set low where the bank curved. He wheeled to cut behind it and come at the deck from the side. Bad plan, worse footing. His horse hit wet clay, slid, through grit, went to a knee, recovered. Spooked toward the ferry rope. Cade stood and fired once into dry dust well away from horse and people, warning loud and clean. The gelding bishop snorted but did not rear. The spooked horse veered off and slammed a wagon wheel. Spoke snapped like a match. The crowd stepped as one. A short square wall of tired people who had no room left for cruelty. The leader saw a story dying and picked another. He raised his gun into empty air and tried to own the sound. Cade's second shot took the air first and ended the notion. Still into dust, still safe. The leader's wrist sagged. The ferryman's pole settled with the weight of a county. Number 4 dropped his smile on the ground and did not stoop to get it. Number 3 put the paper back in his coat like a man pocketing a dead moth. The 5 backed their animals and left to tell a different version, one where the sun was in their eyes and the rope was slick and the crowd unfair, all of it true to them. Quiet came back the way rain does after wind, soft and necessary. Someone pressed a honey biscuit into Ada's palm. Another tied a fresh strip of cloth where she had scraped her elbow on the ramp. Bishop took a drink and splashed his own face like a child. Cade found himself laughing, a small broken sound that fixed itself. Ada laughed too, and the yard smiled. Because you cannot pretend against that. The ferryman waved them forward, deck clear, cable humming. The flatboat slid across bright water like a page turning. Midway he looked at Ada's steady eyes and Cade's hands that never shook and said, "We marry people sometimes at this rope, the way a preacher does. If they ask kind, if they mean it." The old man's wife at the winch chuckled and said, "We got a clean ribbon and a little book for the names." The child from the blue cart shouted, "Do it," and the yard laughed again, bright and good. Cade looked at Ada, not like a man asking to be saved, like a man offering the place he stands. He said, "I will never spend you as proof against my ghosts. I will build things where you can sleep and not count exits. My name is a tool if you want it, a coat if you do not. Choose me or do not, I remain your ally either road." Ada held his eyes, and the rope sang and the water said yes against the hull. She nodded, not a small thing, a whole life thing, and put her hand in his with a grip that made promises real. The ferryman spoke the plain words people have used since river met bank. The wife tied the ribbon around their joined hands. The crowd clapped in the way work people clap. Sharp and few meaning over music. Bishop tossed his head and stamped once like he understood paperwork, kept simple. Sunlight lay on everything like approval. By afternoon they rode out from Willer Ford as husband and wife, not as rescue and rescued. East Road ran level, a meadow opened, wind combed it smooth. Cade pointed to a stand of ash by a small spring and said, "A house fits there that faces morning," Ada said, with a porch wide enough for 2 chairs and shoes left tidy at dusk. "We can do that," he said. "We can do it slow and right." The last of the riders watched them from a far rise and did nothing. People in town had already decided what story to keep. Clegg would count coins and find fewer friends. Paper has a short season in places where water runs and hands hold. They rode on in light that stayed bright to the horizon and did not fail in the years after. The chute grew over. Rook Creek kept talking. The bridge got new boards. Men told the ferry story in winter to warm themselves, and a house rose under the ash trees, square and honest, with a door painted the faded blue of an old sky. And when evening came, they sat on that porch and breathed the same air and did not need to speak much, because some quiet is not empty. Some quiet is a whole choir, 5 lines to hold the rest, warm and brief. We chose each other in bright daylight, not in hiding. We kept our hands busy and our promises plain. We made a home where silence meant peace. We thanked the river for asking hard questions and letting us answer together, and every morning felt like a beginning, not a reprieve. If you feel that in the story, subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales and keep riding with us.